Notice Negreanu is betting very big with his premium hands, king 9 and better, that are almost certainly good, and then a lot of his junky hands that still have equity, right? His hands that don't do great whenever it checks down, but they can still get there on the river. So this is a pretty big error from Negreanu. Hello everyone, I am Jonathan Little, back with another hand from the 200-400 high stakes poo-flinging match between Doug Polk and Daniel Negreanu. They are flinging it with the best of them. Let's take a look at this interesting hand where Doug Polk raises it up with the King Jack of clubs. Daniel Negreanu, 3 bets with the 8-7 suited. If you are looking at this 3-bet and thinking, oh, that's risky, you have not studied the free GTO preflop charts that I've made available for you. Make sure you get those right now at pokercoaching.com/HUNL. Because if you're screwing up preflop, you're just making mistakes left and right. And at this point, I'm going to presume that you all know how to play heads-up preflop poker, 100 big blinds deep, reasonably well. Now, I realize they're a little bit deeper than this, but those charts are still pretty much going to apply. So make sure you are not messing up these common spots by getting your preflop charts. Over to Doug Polk, you should know he can either call or 4-bet. He is not going to fold. And we go to the flop. Flop comes queen, 5-3. This is a situation where as the pre-flop 3-better on a very uncoordinated board, you are going to want to bet very frequently using a small bet size. This is what the GTO solver recommends doing in almost every scenario, and it puts your opponent in pretty tough spots. That is exactly what Negreanu does. He goes for a 4th pot bet, and as we see here, we confirm this with the solver. Solver does go for a 4th pot bet the vast majority of the time, 74% of the time. And you see the 8-7 suited, often going for that bet size. You see here the solver bets 70% pot about 11% of the time and checks about 15% of the time. And you probably should work those into your range to some extent. But if you just wanted to bet every time small, you're probably not losing all that much equity. That said, these players are playing high stakes poker here, and they want to make sure they're playing as close to the solver as they reasonably can. So they should look to check some hands that have showdown value or just like no equity at all, right? So we see hands like pocket jacks, very likely the best hand, but if a lot of money goes in, it's probably not. This hand checks a lot of the time. We see some hands like some top pairs that can easily stick around for any amount of aggression or checking sometimes. We see some ace highs checking. We see some bottom pairs checking. Then we see some just total garbage hands like 10-7, no backdoor flush draw checking, or 10-8, right? No flush draw. These hands are opting to check sometimes too. So some total give-ups are checking, and a lot of marginal made hands are checking in this scenario, plus a few traps, like you'll see, pocket queens trap every once in a while. Even a hand like ace queen traps every once in a while. Pocket aces traps every once in a while. But for the most part, this is a spot where if you wanted to make your life easy, just bet small and frequently. Around to Doug Polk with his premium hand here. He has an overcard, a backdoor flush draw, and a backdoor straight draw. He's not going anywhere, and he does elect to make the call. And I just want to show you the power of these small bets. So when Polk is facing this small bet on the flop, notice how wide he has to continue. You may think, oh yeah, call with any pair, right? But no, actually you're supposed to call with any backdoor flush draw that has a little bit of backdoor straight equity. Like as you see here, Jack 7 backdoor draw is sticking around against a bet. 8-7 of diamonds, hearts, and clubs, right? That hand has to call a bet. Really, the only hands Doug Polk gets to fold here are really weak hands without a backdoor flush draw. Everything else has to stick around against a small bet. I actually have a 30-day tournament challenge happening right now at pokercoaching.com where we discuss things like this. When you're facing a small bet, you have to defend very wide. And if you make the mistake of substantially overfolding or even overfolding just a little bit here, your money is going to go your opponent's direction. If you want to get involved in that 30-day cash game challenge where I send you good, actionable cash game information every day for the next 30 days, check out pokercoaching.com/cash game challenge. Make sure you take advantage of that. So this is a spot where Doug Polk is going to call. With his raises, you see he's mostly raising the best hands plus some sporadic bluffs. Often these gut shots are going for bluffs. Also, some bottom pairs are going for bluffs. Kind of neat to see. This is another spot, though, where if Doug Polk wanted to call the vast majority of the time, you see 74% of the time only folding out his junk. It's perfectly fine. All right. We go to the turn. Turn is the king of spades. And this is where Negreanu has to decide if he's going to go for it or if he's going to chicken out. And I want you to think about this scenario and ask yourself, what would you do in this spot? Would you check? Would you bet small, like 30% pot? Would you bet medium, like 60% pot? Or would you bet big, like an overpot bet, like 120% pot? What I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and commit to your answer below in the comment section. Go ahead, pause the video. I'll write it down. I'll wait for you. All right, did you do it? I see some of you did not do it. I'm gonna wait one more second. Go down there and do it. I'm serious. Okay, fine. I'm trusting that the vast majority of you did it. If you didn't, I will know. All right, in this scenario, Negreanu definitely wants to continue betting, and a common pattern that we have studied throughout all of these heads-up hands that we have been going through is that in 3-bet pots, after you continuation bet small and your opponent calls, you want to bet the turn very often using a big bet size. They'll allow you to bet roughly the same amount on the turn and the river and put your opponent all in. That's referred to as geometric bet sizing. And you often want to be doing that with your best hands that are happy getting the money in, and your hands that have some equity that lack showdown value. So what are those hands? Does 8-7 suited fall into the category of that type of bluff? Well, the answer here is definitely not, because 8-7 has basically no cards on the river it can get bailed out on, right? If he's against a king, a queen, or a pair higher than an 8, he cannot get bailed out. He has 0% equity. And you're going to find that these 0% equity bluffs on the turn almost never happen. So in this scenario, he's definitely going to want to be bluffing with hands like Jack 10, Jack 9, 10 9, maybe some gut shots, maybe some open-ended straight draws if he happens to have some of them. But Negreanu does decide to go for the bet here. Also notice he goes for 2/3 pot. This is almost always going to be a mistake. Negreanu really needs to focus on geometric bet sizing, where he is betting something like 120% pot here on the turn, looking to make a big river jam with some of his bluffs. But that said, this hand is not one that wants to bet, I can almost assure you. Hope I'm right. Let's take a look. We see the solver actually does check this hand the majority of the time. We nailed it on the Jack 10, Jack 9, and 10 9. These hands bet every time. Notice they're using the 120% pot bet. Also notice 7-6 for a gut shot does that. 6-4 for open-ended does that. 5-3 is 2 pair, obviously. 4-2 suited does it. Ace-2 and Ace-4 for gut shots, also overbet, right? Ace-Jack for a gut shot, overbets. Ace-10 for a gut shot, overbets. King-10, top pair. King-Jack, top pair. These hands are all very good, opting to go for big bets. So we see basically King-9 suited and better is the premium hand going for value. Notice Ace-Queen does not bet big, right? Because Ace-Queen here has been downgraded to a very strong but marginal mate hand. So this makes a lot of sense, right? Notice Negreanu is betting very big with his premium hands, King-9 and better, that are almost certainly good, and then a lot of his junky hands that still have equity, right? His hands that don't do great whenever it checks down, but they can still get there on the river. So this is a pretty big error from Negreanu. Now, if Negreanu did happen to use this particular hand as an overbet bluff, he is losing a little bit of money, but it's not the end of the world. That said, when he does go for this 2/3 pot bet, you see the solver really doesn't like a 2/3 pot bet. It almost never does it. So that is usually not what you want to be doing in this spot. You may also find it surprising that Negreanu is checking a ton on the turn, 66% of the time. But this is one of these spots where when you bet and your opponent calls, they have a lot of reasonable-ish stuff, right? They folded all their junk. And that results in you having to check a large chunk of the time. Negreanu does bet, though. Doug Polk has this top pair type hand. Seems like an easy call to me. Let's see if he's actually supposed to raise it. And it turns out King-Jack suited does raise some portion of the time, which is kind of neat to see. I presumed it was not quite good enough to raise, but against this 2/3 pot bet, things get a little bit odd, because who knows exactly what Negreanu's range looks like when he does make this bet. But this is a spot where if Negreanu overbet with this range, it would now no longer make sense to raise with the King-Jack, because what's going to give him action, right? He's only going to get action from like King-9 and better, which he kind of blocks, which means usually he's getting action from just the premium hands and draws if they're getting the right price. So this is a spot where Polk mostly calls. Kind of like Negreanu's strategy on the turn where he's betting very polarized. Doug Polk should be raising very polarized. We see him raising with Ace-2 for a draw. He doesn't really have 4-2. We see him raising 7-6 every once in a while for a draw, 10-9 every once in a while for a bad draw, weak draw, right? We see some Ace-Jack raising, Ace-4 raising, so gut shots as well, mostly raising. and then premium hands, right? Pocket fives, pocket threes, queen five, and king jack and better. But I think this is definitely a fine spot to call for Doug Polk. River is the 10 of clubs, and if you're down Negreanu at this point, I think you got to be pretty willing to go for this bet. I know he's not supposed to have this hand in his range, so he's obviously overbluffing here. Notice when he does bet, if he is going to go for the all-in bet, he's betting almost 2 times pot, right? Which is a little bit big. You'd much rather bet a little bit bigger on the turn to let your river bet be smaller. And Negreanu is not a chicken. Old man is speeding. He does go for the bluff. Notice here, if he does have 8-7, I actually want to point out something the solver does that I failed to mention. Solver goes for the small bet if he does have the 8-7. Solver goes for the 33% pot bet. So let's talk about this. When Doug Polk calls the turn bet, okay, let's go back here. Negreanu bets turn, Polk calls. Let's take a look at some of these hands that Doug Polk should be calling with on the turn. You see fives are calling, right? We see under pairs are calling some portion of the time. And while Negreanu certainly does have plenty of big bluffs in this scenario, right? Like we see ace 4 going all in. We see jack 5 for blocking the 2 pairs and the jack blocker going all in. We see 5-4 blocking the pair, sometimes goes all in, right? We see hand like jack 8 also blocking the straight, going all in. So this scenario, Negreanu does have some all ends, but it turns out the 8-7 suited is not when he selects. But you do want to have some small bluffs in this scenario. Not a lot, but some. We see 7-4 and 7-6 randomly going for the small bluff. 6-3 randomly going for the small bluff. And the purpose of that is to get your opponent off of a lot of these under pairs and fives. It's not going to work all that often, but it will work some portion of the time. So kind of cool to see that Negreanu actually does go for a small bet some real portion of the time, even though he does have the all-in size as well. I think I would have presumed that he should have been just straight up more linear or more polarized here and just bet very, very polar on the river. But I suppose if he checks the river with a hand like a king, Polk's just going to check it behind a lot of the time, right, with his queen, so you don't get value. So you'd really like to be able to bet your weak kings, which the solver does recommend. So it's pretty cool to see. Notice that if you did bet the turn with a hand like ace queen, you do not bet it on the river. So that makes sense, right? This is a pretty bad river for that hand. So you're really just betting good kings and better. And you do want to bet your kings here because the kings are probably good. So he does go for the bluff. But again, if we look at what the solver recommends a small bet with this hand if he does have it. So Negreanu's played this hand very, very far from GTO. Over to Doug Polk. Easy call with the king, of course. Interesting to see that facing this bet size, all of the pairs fold, all of the fives fold, right? Even some queens fold. I'm kind of surprised to see a queen folding. I have to imagine if Negreanu is over bluffing in this scenario that the queen should actually find a pretty reasonable call. But you see here, the big bet should get through a lot of the time, but Doug Polk with the king jack is not going to fold. You're going to find that usually when you have top pair, heads up, you're not trying to fold. Very neat to see, though, that some of the weaker ones, the ones that lack relevant blocker kickers, do fold. I'm kind of shocked to see a king actually folds here. But not king jack, and a giant pot is pushed towards Doug Polk. So that's going to be it for this hand. If you liked it, do me a favor, click the like and subscribe button below. Click, 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 click. Go ahead and do it. Also, I really want to make sure you improve your cash game skills. So make sure you check out my 30-day cash game challenge right now at pokercoaching.com/cashgamechallenge. Good luck in your games. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more strategy lessons, pre-flop charts, and interactive quizzes, make sure you get your free membership to pokercoaching.com right now at pokercoaching.com/free. I'll talk to you next time.